Did Amelia Earhart really just vanish into thin air? Well, likely not. People don't just disappear into nothingness. There's always an explanation. And today, I'm back to discuss more possibilities as to what really happened to Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan. We're going to start off the list with a recent statement made by Tony Romeo. This is the CEO, again, of Deep Sea Vision, who led the recent expedition that shot the sonar image that may possibly be Earhart's plane. Now, ever since this story came out, there have been some skeptics, and one of the big reasons people think it's unlikely this is actually her plane is because there are tons of planes that have crashed in the Pacific Ocean, especially World War II era planes, considering how many aerial battles took place. In fact, a lot of you in the comments have been saying this exact same thing, that it's just unlikely this one specific object could be her plane with how many other crashed planes there are from World War II. And I kind of had the same feeling, definitely wanted to be more optimistic that the mystery could be solved, but at the same time, I totally get the skepticism. But Tony Romeo was interviewed a couple days back, and the subject of this, sonar image being just one of the many crashed World War II planes came up, and he stated that it's very unlikely it could be a crashed fighter plane. Now, there are plenty of crashed planes in the Pacific, but the Pacific Ocean is huge, and the thing is, there aren't any known World War II battles that took place in this specific area near Howland Island, so you may not want to just write this recent discovery off right away. But for the sake of fairness, I'll discuss a counter-argument too. David Jourdan, co-founder and president of a deep-sea ocean exploration company called Nauticos, is on the fence. This guy has a lot of experience on the subject of missing crafts. He's been involved in a number of expeditions where he and his team have discovered sunken ships and planes, like the INS Dakar, an Israeli submarine, the Kaga, a Japanese aircraft carrier that sunk during the Battle of Midway, and he's led two separate expeditions in search of Amelia Earhart's plane using sonar. Nauticos did extensive searches around Howland Island in 2002 and 2006, but nothing turned up. When asked about the recent sonar image captured by Tony Romeo and Deep Sea Vision, Jourdan stated it is impossible to identify anything from a sonar image alone, as sound can be tricky and the artifact could be damaged in unpredictable ways, altering its shape. For that reason, he can never say that something is or isn't from a sonar image alone. End quote. So just a reminder that even though news like this is exciting, we don't want to get too ahead of ourselves. So we've touched a little bit in part 1 and 2 about what may have happened to Earhart and Noonan after their plane went down, and one theory is that they could have ended up on Nikomororo Island. Well, if this theory is true, then what happened to them once they were on the island? Why were there no remains other than bones, which may or may not have belonged to Earhart at all? Well, some people have discussed the grim possibility that they were consumed by coconut crabs. Now, if you've never heard of coconut crabs before, I'll give you the lowdown. These are massive crabs that live on land, whose leg span can reach over 3 feet. And in terms of diet, they're not very picky. They'll eat fruit like coconuts, of course, but they're also pretty gnarly predators. They'll hunt rats, birds, and apparently even other coconut crabs. Any animal that's willing to eat other members of its own species probably isn't gonna have anything against eating you. So, you know where I'm going with this. It'll be a pretty gruesome fate for sure, but it is a possibility. Here's a less depressing theory though. Earhart may have taken on a new identity and become a nurse. There have been a number of claims made by people over the years saying they've seen women who bear an uncanny resemblance to Earhart, working in some other field with some other identity, and this is just one of those stories. So the story goes that several Allied pilots in World War II saw a woman on the Guadalcanal Island that looked exactly like Amelia Earhart. They could have sworn it was her. This woman was a nurse working on the island, and I'm sure some of them must have asked if if it was her, and she would have likely said no, but that doesn't really prove anything to conspiracy theorists who believe she would have been trying to hide her identity anyway. This is a bit of a far-fetched tale, but it's a nice idea. Unfortunately, this nurse was likely a woman named Meryl Furland, who apparently just looked kinda like Amelia Earhart. Next up, we have the Tokyo Rose conspiracy theory. This one falls under the umbrella of Earhart and Fred Noonan having been captured by Japanese forces. A pretty popular Amelia Earhart disappearance conspiracy theory. So what happened after they were captured? Well, one possibility, according to some, is that Amelia Earhart became a Tokyo Rose. Tokyo Rose was a kind of generic name given by Allied forces to English-speaking female radio broadcasters of Japanese propaganda during the Second World War. These broadcasters were tasked with demoralizing Allied troops, and apparently some troops thought one of these broadcasters sounded a lot like Amelia Earhart. And that's really it. Not a whole lot to go off of here. If you think Amelia Earhart spreading propaganda for the Axis powers is far-fetched, that's because it is. I mean, could she have been captured and forced to do it under duress? I mean, sure, but seems like a lot of unnecessary effort on Japan's side. Here's a much more likely and unfortunate outcome for Earhart and Noonan, though, that they were eaten by sharks. Again, much like the whole coconut crab scenario, it sucks to think about, but it is very likely. Their remains may not have been found because they may not have ever made it to land. There are a number of shark species in the Pacific, and the chances of them being eaten increase even further if you consider the fact that they may have been injured in the landing. It's a pretty well-known fact that sharks are attracted to that red stuff that flows through the body, and they may have descended upon the pair before they even came close to land. But let's move away from the unfortunate possibilities for just a little bit. Next up, we have the mysterious photo. So the idea here is that Earhart somehow ended up on Emaro Island. This is kind of far from where her plane is expected to have gone down, but the story goes that a US Navy crew member had been sent to the island and found an intriguing photo pinned up in the hut of a local man. The photo was of a Japanese soldier, a missionary, a young boy, and a woman who looked almost identical to Amelia Earhart. So again, had she been taken by Japanese forces and ended up on the island at one point? Well, the crew member contacted naval intelligence officers who came and apparently confiscated the photo. That's why we haven't shown it here. It's never been seen again. So there could be many possibilities for this. First of all, this whole story could be totally bogus. Sure, but perhaps this one also plays into the whole cover-up theory that Earhart had been part of some top secret mission of some kind and the US government wanted to make it seem like she died in a plane crash or vanished. All right, let's get really out there. Why not, right? Could Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan have ended up in a parallel universe? I mean, so far we've talked about all these possible clues that pointed the two either dying, being kidnapped, or taking on new identities, but what if they really did vanish? I mean, I know this list is supposed to be signs that she may not have vanished, but they may have vanished from our universe and into another one. As for how, it's impossible to say, obviously, but planes have been known to go missing, seemingly into thin air, and one conspiracy theory is that they end up in a parallel universe. So there could be this other timeline, or multiple timelines, almost identical to ours, just with slight variations, and in one of these timelines, Earhart never vanished. She made it to her next destination and went on to complete the journey, going down in history as the first woman to successfully fly around the world. And wouldn't that be great? So why did Amelia Earhart's plane go down? Well, most likely they'd run out of fuel. But for the sake of having a little more fun with this, let's dive into a more wild idea. That being, they encountered some sort of magnetic anomaly. There's been this idea floating around for some time that Amelia Earhart's disappearance might be linked to magnetic anomalies, kind of similar to the mysterious occurrences reported in the Bermuda Triangle. The idea is that certain regions on Earth have irregular magnetic fields that could interfere with navigational equipment, causing confusion for pilots. And the last thing you want while flying is to be confused. used. So could Earhart and Noonan have encountered some unexpected magnetic disturbance leading to navigation errors, which led to the plane coming down in open water? Possibly. Finally, though, we have a pretty fun idea that Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan did survive the initial crash, but they didn't take on new identities. They weren't kidnapped by Japanese forces, they didn't die on Gardner Island. Instead, they were stranded, but were rescued by residents of a long-lost civilization living underwater and taken to their home where they lived out the rest of their lives in secret. Yeah, that's right, I'm going there. Maybe Deep Sea Vision is gonna retrieve this plane, if what they captured on that sonar image is even a plane, of course, and Noonan and Earhart's remains aren't going to be in there because they were taken somewhere else. What could this place be, you ask? Perhaps the long-lost city of Atlantis, perhaps some underwater civilization we've never even heard of before. I mean, let's face it, this is probably the most likely outcome out of anything on this list, or parts 1 and 2 combined. All right, time for a comment shout out. This one was posted by Rod72074 on my DB Cooper Discoveries That Prove He Never Really Vanished video. How hard can it be to make a Blade movie where he kills vampires? Take the daughter out, leave Blade some type of mystical vampire villain, and let Blade do what he do. The only reason why they can't figure out how to get the movie off the ground is because they want to add all this extra nonsense that Blade don't need. I'm with you, Rod. We gotta let Blade do what he do. I don't know how that came up in a DB Cooper video, but I appreciate it. All right, with all that said, I'm your host, James, and I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.